South Africa's constitution has, Chapter 9 of it sets up institutions which protect and defend constitutional democracy. And these institutions are important because they are guaranteed by the Constitution. And what that means is they are independent and they are free from political interference, in theory. And they are protected because the individuals who head up these Chapter 9 institutions are really accountable to Parliament. Some Chapter 9 institutions which people might be familiar with: the Independent Electoral Commission, the Auditor General's Office, the South African Human Rights Commission, and also the Commission on Gender Equality and the Commission on Linguistic Rights. But of course the Commission, the institution that people will know best as a Chapter 9 institution is the Public Protector's Office. We know that our current Public Protector, Thuli Madonsela, has really been at the forefront of dealing with issues of abuse of state resources, and that is the state, whether it is the national government, provincial government or local government, and really looking at the abuse of money but also the abuse of power and position in these state institutions. And we know that she's handed down some very interesting and important reports, the most recent of which has been the report into the excessive expenditure by the President and various other ministries on the President's homestead in Nkandla. And there she found that there had been an abuse of resources and that the President indeed has to pay money back into the fiscus, which had been wasted in her view. Now, it's interesting because the Public Protector, as I said, and all these Chapter 9 institutions are accountable to Parliament. And the Public Protector once a year reports to the Justice Committee where she will lay out her plans. They're able to give input on that, but they're not able to tell her who to investigate and when to investigate. So her independence is sacrosanct, but also she has a fixed term which is non-renewable of 7 years. The same applies to the person heading up the Human Rights Commission, the Auditor General's Office. And so it's vitally important, particularly the Auditor General's Office, vitally important because that looks at accountability for every single penny spent. So we know where our rands and cents are going, and we know that often there is wasteful and fruitless expenditure. The question, of course, which is the question of accountability, is what happens once we know the truth. So the Public Protector, for instance, she might be able to make recommendations. That is all the power she has. She doesn't have any other powers of enforcement. And so the question then really remains is that where does the legitimacy of her office come from? It comes from the Constitution, the fact that it is these are independent bodies. But the legitimacy comes from the credibility which we, the public, invest in these institutions, but also the way in which people in power, our elected representatives, in fact respond to the Public Protector's recommendations or indeed the Auditor General's findings on expenditure. And here I think South Africa has been found wanting because we know that the President, for instance, has taken his time in responding to the Public Protector's report. And I would argue that that has the force and effect of, in fact, undermining her office. And so one has to be very careful so that we lend the right degree of legitimacy, which is a constitutional legitimacy, to all of these bodies because they are there to protect and to defend our constitutional democracy and ultimately the rights of the most vulnerable citizens.